It's okay.
Interior of their house. And I had never seen that kind of really myself. But I didn't actually, whatever I have seen, apart from Kachchh, some things we are supposed to take a little new form, but it's there in my work. Another politicians in America to help us. So they are
So they introduced you to Kachchh in the first place?
no, later because of them.
You actually do, you got to go and catch
No, my son does.
That explains a lot.
Won't be able to work. Because of fusion,
Coming.
there were women who would actually make the image that they saw in embroidery on a cloth. And you were right there, taking images of what we saw. They were taking that photograph and did you change pattern?
this Sharma, photographer from Delhi, it's a bit of a Marxist idea. I mean, taking images to show off. I didn't know what I was doing. All I do is making pictures which are
Here is about the art. That's Manjeet.
I opened that
Ask questions.
if I have done it.
So like, what animal do you see in this?
Individual experience. How did it go?
I continue. Not only Kachchh, but
don't know enough food. I don't know.
More important for me. Fortunately, it was soft. And those diaries are given to
મનથી ચોવાજે હેડો મોંથી ન ચોવાજે દિલથી ડેવાજે હેડો હથથી ન ડેવાજે આઉં ગાલ કઢાં ને આઈ સમझो તैं કોર કર્યું વગર ચે સમझे હુજ પાંજો ચોવાજે. Thank you so much to all of you who have come here today for this lovely Kachchhi day that we are bringing together Somaiya Vidyavihar University, the Somaiya School of Civilisation Studies, the Center for Desert and Kachch Studies, collaborating with the Guild Gallery. I want to do a heartfelt thank you to Sameer sir, our Chancellor, Amrita Somaiya, Siddharth Somaiya, and Shalini Soni for making this happen and for giving this wonderful space to these beautiful paintings. Alexander Burns, in his report of 1827, after the flooding of Indus, described Kachch as terra hospitis ferox, a strange and ferocious land, where travelers experienced hallucinations and mirages, which with later additions, it is his interpretation of Kachch changed to a unique geomorphological phenomenon without a counterpart on the globe. The story of Kachch, as many historians say, is the story of India. It begins from as old as and much older than the Indus Valley civilizations with all the migrations that happened, and it's also very similar to the story that happened throughout India. A center in a university is a place which actually changes and incorporates a whole lot of interdisciplinarity. And so is it with the Center for Kachch and Desert Studies, that it actually weaves in so many disciplines across and ensures that we have a whole lot of new perspectives that we work on. Welcome, Sameer sir. Now, it began with an idea that Sameer sir and Amrita had many years back, and of course, we had started talking about it 7 years back, and it's only after things materialized that we came and this idea of a Center for Kachch and Desert Studies was taken birth. Speaking about an idea, let's go to what an ideology is. The smallest component of ideology is an ideologeme, which is the elementary cell. On one side, it is an opinion, and on the other, articulated as a narrative. Ideology is at the heart of all issues, not as individual ideology or opinion, but rather as that intersection between biological, individual, and the collective, which is at stake in thinking, in literary expression, and in language itself, where the subject leaves its most visible mark in the shifter. And the shifter here is a very interesting element. It is a linguistic term for blank words, pronouns, temporal, spatial, and expressions like here and now, which means shifting according to the situation or context. And for things like a small district, which is the largest district of India, we have to incorporate a whole lot of things that make it alive to the people who are living today. Keep the things that have been ancient so alive to them who are in this contemporary world. We have undertaken various development projects in Kachch. We aim to do 100 libraries, which is the pet project of Samir sir. We are all here to fulfill that dream. And along with this development happens an interdisciplinary research in EVS, physics, chemistry, Gujarati, education. We've had students writing research papers from various fields after they come back from these research trips, doing cattle survey, doing classroom ecology, doing work on, as we will see from today onwards, on fine arts, photography as well. So with that, I want to move to another interesting saying that we have in Kachch. Labhela vya bakri, venai aya ot, muketa adha hekdich gal sekhaya ain, va vare ti DJ pot, ta na gotni pe bakri, ne na venaje ot. So, which means, सबको समझ में आया? Can I be apologetically not translating this, or should I? I should? Okay. So someone goes out to look for a goat and instead loses a camel. But my father told me that when the wind blows very harshly, give the back to it so that you are protected and you don't have to then lose your goat or the camel. So you have to move with the time, with the tide, and as much as Kachch is forgotten by people as we've moved on, we all don't want all of us to forget this heritage. It's rich, rich heritage that belongs to us. It's all for us to upkeep, to protect, to preserve. And along with that, I want to get back to a little bit of culture, because this, along with this heritage, there is a whole lot of academic work that we are doing to ensure this soft power of Kachch remains as it is. Homi Bhabha says that such syncretism often has underpinnings of a wounded cosmopolitanism. The syncretism that we talk about, the migrations that Kachch had to witness over the years of ocean trade, and that changed the entire character of Kachch. And this is what is again counteracted by him, where he says that these are vernacular cosmopolitanisms, which measures global progress from the minoritarian perspective. Its claims to freedom and equality are marked by a right to difference, inequality, rather than a diversity founded on a dual economy. Such a right to difference, as a French philosopher, Etienne Balibar, suggests, does not require the restoration of an original or essential cultural or group identity, nor does it consider equality to be a neutralization of differences in the name of universality of rights, where implementation is often subject to ideological and institutional definitions of what counts as human in any specific cultural or political context. So it is this very human endeavor that we come up with a center like this, and I'm very happy to see students. We have had more than 700 students go across these these photography photos, and they've had very interesting questions to ask, like, why does this photograph cost 1 lakh? Why should that house be round? Why are those people sitting over there doing this resistance movement, and why was it important in that day and age? For a class 2, class 4 student to give them this exposure to such high quality art is something that we all want to thank Samir sir and Amrita for making this possible, available. Thank you, Shalini. I just had some reflections while we were doing the walkthrough. Can you look at that girl over there, that beautiful girl who's posing? She's wearing ajrak. And there's a poem I had written on ajrak, and I just want to share that with you. This is based in Ajrakpur, 2001. Work on it today, sell it tomorrow. Add some more madar seeds, make galicho shine below indigo kakar. Place central geometrical trefoil, gleaming razak directed. Drapery as priest king excavated at Mohenjo-daro, ensure 7 to 9 pH. Modent karo kappa cloth, one in hardo and other in alum. Add variations for we lack skills in digital marketing. A makeshift hammock for baby Lakshmi guided his imagination. So this is the plight of the artisans in Kachch, which we are doing so much for through the Somaiya Kalavidya. And I mean, they have so much art in them, but it's very difficult for them to market it. Digital marketing is new to them, but they have this imagination that they want to make a hammock for a little baby, which is made of ajrak. Then if you can move your eyes behind to the second photograph where the woman is walking with water pots on her head. That's Bunny, the photograph clicked in 1976. And beside her is Gando Bawad. For those of you who know a little about Kachch, this is a very wild breed, Juciflis pluriflora. And there's something that I want to share about that. This was a poem called Being Left Behind. And these are the coordinates. Marked in coordinates 26 degrees, 19 minutes north to 23 degrees, 52 minutes north, and 68 degrees, 56 minutes east to 70 degrees, 32 minutes east. Wetland, dryland, wasteland, Bunny. In its jaded mellowness, flashed with banners, annual Pashu Mela. Cattle make no note of time, nor do its possessors, and those over them in a loop of continuum. So it is that lawsuits have been unsuitably over time. Like the omnipresent Saraswati, menfolk arrive in all her absence, trading in Bak Malakhado. Meanwhile, a plinth reads, geography participates every day, and linguistics flattens into cartography, degenerating eco-capital. Although women folk built the bhungo, and after every internal migration, being its matriarch is unheard of. In the vastness and its emptiness, seated away by dammed rivulets, staring at blurred, briny waters, focusing on the excrescence on the blade of a grass, see, anthropocentrically catechized, why can't I be a Gando Bawad meandering seamlessly in a Simado? So this woman who builds the house is not a matriarch. She has done all the work to raise the cattle, but she's not allowed to be a part of the cattle trade. And she only imagines that if she was this wild Gando Bawad of Kachch, where she could just go around without being stopped by anyone and just explore the Simado. And the last one that we'll talk about is appearance and reality, looking at that girl over there, clad in jewelry, fine jewelry of Kachch, which was taken in 1977 in Panch Mahal. That girl seated with her hands like this and all jewelry around her. Designs can be classist or classicist, solidified tradition molten into dagina, designing a mark of estrangement. browsing through Saraf Bazaar, being the ogling other, placing her neck against the glass pane, right where the Jawhar poised itself on the ultramarine blue velvet, leading with her chin up. Nudging at the surging goat, chewing on her sap-green undhani, with her kado to fulfill her undreamt reflection. Diving her fingers between her breasts, one unfeeling, C pulled out the dangling locket. It appeared as if she were to dip it into an inkpot and sketch the thoria. It went diagonally up, gyrating into a silver utilitarian ear cleaner. To make her listen amid the warmth of her bosom, catalogues of Cartier's new collection. And I would also want you to reflect on the Quran school, which is there, which is taken in 1976. Oh, I think that photo is over there, where there are children seated in front and there is a teacher teaching them, which speaks a lot about the Samp Dili of the people of Kachch. With that, I want to say that it's been exceptionally wonderful for Kurush Dalal to come here and deliver a lecture on the history of food. He is an Indian archaeologist, historian, and culinary anthropologist. He has his PhD in early Iron Age. He is the Institusen School of Archaeology director, Joint Director, CEMS Institusen and Salsat Explorations Project, Field Director, Chandor Excavations, Consulting Editor, Live History, India, and Assistant Professor, Archaeology. He combines his knowledge of archaeology and history with his passion for cooking to research foods. He has helped popularize these fields by organizing various projects and workshops. And he, as kind as he is with the way he helps students, researchers, teachers, he is kind enough to share so much of information that he's shared over the years in this field. And with that, I want to invite him and speak to all of us about the history of Kachchhi food.
Thank you very much all for being here. Samirji, the entire Somaiya family. It's always so nice to be back at Somaiya with such incredibly innovative, interesting, thought-provoking programs being held here. Big thank you to the Kachch Center, to the Center for Desert Studies, and of course to Somaiya Vidyavihar. And finally, of course, to Yamini ji and her team for putting this together, and the photographer whose amazing display is seen all around us. I was a little taken aback when I was asked to speak on the food of the Kachch, and I was then told very categorically 45 minutes. And I realized that if I did a PPT and said everything that I want to say about the food of the Kachch, we'd probably be here for 4 hours. So I decided that we'd keep it short, tight, and sweet, and maybe at the Kachch Center we can someday have a more interactive program on the food of the Kachch, provided you all are interested in doing something like that. My earliest interactions with Kachchhi food were in Bombay. I had a Kachchhi Menon friend of mine in school, and we ate some of the most amazing meat at his place. And I remember telling him that I was very surprised that I was looking at a meat-eating Muslim family that did not eat fish, even though they were from a coastal area. And he said he had no clue, they just didn't eat fish very much. And I remember speaking to his grandmother, who explained to me that fish was not really accessible in the Kachch. And my fascination for the topography, the geography, and the geology of Kachch actually stemmed from that moment, as to how could a place which on the map seemed to be surrounded by water actually not have access to water. What I found out as I went on, and I had a very close friend of mine who was a Kachchi Bhatia, and just thinking about her and the food I've eaten at her place gets my mouth salivating, and I have to take deep swallows to keep talking to you all. Things like telia bataka and lasagna bataka. And the more I ate the food of the Kachchi Bhatiyas, the more I realized that the food of the Kachchi Bhatiyas, as it stands today, is hugely different from the original food of the Kachchhi Bhatiyas. Because the Kachchhi Bhatiyas today use ingredients that they have been using for less than the last 250 years in their food. And this really blew my brains. In the late 1990s, I had the amazing good fortune to work on the excavations at Dholavira under Dr. R.S. Bisht of the Archaeological Survey of India. I was working right on top of the Citadel Mound, and I had this twinkly-eyed, very, very mischievous-looking supervisor for my crew, and his name was Jaimal Bhai. He's one of the top guides at Dholavira today. And on the second day, very hesitantly, Jaimal Bhai looked at me and said, "Cha leso?" And I was like, out in the middle of nowhere on an archaeological mound, and he wanted to have tea. So I was like, I'd love to have a cup of tea, but I don't really see tea appearing over here. He said, "Na, tame fikar na karo. You don't worry." So there was a beautiful clump of bushes very close to where we were working. Jaimal Bhai disappeared there. 15 minutes or 20 minutes later, he came out with a little blackened aluminum teapot and a stack of saucers. Now, I don't know how many of you all have drunk tea in Gujarat and the Kachch. I don't know what they do to their cups. I have absolutely no idea. There are no cups that are drunk out of. No cups were harmed in the drinking of tea. Tea is drunk out of rakabi, the saucers, regular saucers. I mean, there are probably shops that sell cups to somebody else and saucers are just sent to Gujarat and the Kachch, okay? So this stack of rakabis, he comes up to me. Luckily, I had been well trained at a previous excavation in Saurashtra. So the moment he filled up the first rakabi, I quickly picked it up. And there was this lovely, creamy, slightly odd tasting, sickeningly sweet tea. I mean, how else can you have tea, right, if you're in Gujarat? I mean, please. And I was completely gobsmacked as to how this tea had appeared out of nowhere on the island of Khadir on an archaeological site. So the deal was like this. The entire crew liked to drink tea. Like all Gujarati people, their engines run on tea. You know, that's the number one fuel. And, well, we had tea twice a day after that for the entire month. The deal works this way. Every day, one person brings some sugar, another person brings some tea leaves. There is a community pot that has been donated, God knows when. There are 3 stones, and everybody picks up twigs on the way to the site. The most ingenious thing is how milk turns up for tea. So on the site, there would be various goats set to graze by various different people, and the nearest goat walking by was caught by one horn, dragged behind the bushes, and milked straight into the teapot. Straight into the teapot. Okay? So I looked at Jaimal quite horrified when I found out about this about a week later and said, "That's the guy whose goat it is, know that." So he said, "What's his goat doing on my excavation site?" So I was like, "Jaimal, it's not quite your excavation site, but never mind that. I completely agree with your ethical stand on this, that your site, his goat, your right to the milk." And since then, I have been fascinated with the history, archaeology, the geology, the people, and the food of Kachch. So as I moved further into the field of archaeology, the Kachch kept coming back. The Kachch has always been a crossroads. And this is something that you have to understand, that for a very long time, the Kachch, a lot of Kachchi people might be upset about it, was known as Little Sindh, because it was virtually an extension of Sindh. Okay, so it was very commonly known as Little Sindh. It was, of course, known as Kachch. I don't know how many of you all know this, but the Kachch is the largest district in India. There is no larger district in India than the Kachch. There are entire states in India which are smaller than the Kachch. Kerala, for example, would be swallowed by the district of Kachch. Haryana would be swallowed by the district of Kachch. So it's not just Kerala. hanging down there on the side of India. The whole of Estonia, an entire nation, would fit inside Kachch. That's how large Kachch is. And one of the things that normally puts people off in visiting and being involved in the Kachch are the long distances between locations. But that is the beauty of the Kachch. It's traveling from one location to the other, across the little run, into the great run, back again into the Bhuj area, into the Banni grasslands. That is the joy of being in the Kachch. And the Kachch is an incredibly arid zone. If you travel through the Kachch in the month of April or May, everything is shades of brown and yellow. There is virtually no green unless there are a few perennial evergreen trees that you come across, and of course, miles and miles of prosopis, or our good friend Ganda Bawal. So Ganda Bawal, also called Australian bubble, was introduced from Australia to India in the hope of helping the climate of Gujarat and Maharashtra and Kachch. It grows wildly because almost nothing attacks it. It just loves India. And it had become quite a menace for some time. And then the people of Gujarat and Kachch suddenly realized that they had an amazing source of renewable firewood. Because the faster you cut down the Ganda Bawal, the faster it comes back. So Ganda Bawal has now become a huge industry in its own right. It's also reforested and re-animalized large portions of Gujarat and the Kachch. I have seen herds of nilgai where they were never heard of for the last 100 years coming back because of Ganda Bawal. The nilgai is always followed by jackals and hyenas, and of course by leopards. And then, because the nilgai are doing their thing, various other deer species and wild boar also end up in these same Bawal jungles, or Ganda Bawal jungles to be more precise. I have seen entire landscapes which were bare, now completely covered in green, thanks to just this one species. And it's great for all the nomadic pastoralists. And if there's one thing that the Gujarat and Kachch really has to boast about, it's the various nomadic pastoral groups that they have. The Maldharis and their buffaloes, the Meghwals and their sheep and goats, and of course the Rabaris with their cattle and their camels. And these communities have been the mainstay of transport. Today when we look at nomadic species of peoples and groups and tribes, we look at them as just kind of circularly moving within the landscape, kind of aimlessly. A lot of this has to do with modern boundaries. These people regularly took huge excursions from Gujarat through the Kachch into Sindh, sometimes all the way to Punjab and back. And they carried with them various different loads for various different peoples. These were the original Sardarji truck drivers of Western India. And it was on the backs of their animals that goods moved and commerce was possible. But modern boundaries have sadly cut them off from each other and from their traditional lands. When you look at the food of these people, it's a very simple, rustic food. Today, there is much more of a repertoire than there has been, say, 300 or 400 or 1,000 years ago. Today, thanks to a lot of very interesting species of foods, plant foods, that we call the Columbian exchange coming into India, they have radicalized the food of Kachch. I'll get there. Don't worry. The food of Kachch 300 to 400 years ago would have been limited to absolutely what was grown or what could be dried. A lot of dried food is eaten in the Kachch. A lot of food is foraged to this very day in the Kachch. Food that would otherwise not be looked at in wetter environments becomes critical to the survival of people in the Kachch. One of the most interesting foods that is eaten in the Kachch is a bitter cucumber. How many people have eaten it? It's called the kothimbra. And at first sound, you probably think it's coriander. But it's a beautiful bitter melon that is sliced, mildly salted, and then dried in the sun. Kachchhi. Kachchhi. Okay? Also kotimra, kachri, depending on which part of the Kachch you're in. So foods like this is what have given enormous quantities of vitamins and minerals to the people of Kachch. And, well, different taste profiles also. There is only one spice that the Kachch grows, which is cumin. Cumin, jeera. Jeeru from Kachch, and various areas of the Kachch will battle other areas. So they will all agree that the jeera from the Kachch is the best, the cumin from the Kachch, but then they will battle which area of the Kachch gives you a better, more jeera tasting jeera and less jeera tasting jeera. And I was sorely disappointed last month when I was in the Kachch and the people that I wanted to collect jeera from had sold everything out. In fact, the last 30 kilos got sold out when we were arriving in the night. So it is quite a disaster. Jeera, if you go into the Kachch to these farmers and buy, is often 50% the price of jeera in Bombay. That's how much the markup is by middlemen. And it's sad to see that these people get only 50% of what we are paying for it, and that's wholesale prices. When you actually come down to retail and 50 grams and 100 grams, it's even less. So jeera has always been, cumin has been the age-old spice of the Kachch. Along with cumin has been onions and garlic. So surprisingly, though there is a very vibrant Jain presence in the Kachch, onions and garlic, alliums have been the mainstay of the Kachch for a very long time. And dungli, as the onion is called, which is slightly different from the pilipatti of Nasik and Maharashtra, is something that is also sliced and dried traditionally. So it would be sliced and dried in the dry months to last through the wet months, something that has completely disappeared today. Okay? Every single vegetable that they could grow, with the exception of brinjals, they would dry. Beans were the mainstay, dal was the mainstay, and their animals and the milk of the animals, along with their number one starch. The number one starch of the Kachch is basically pearl millet. So what we casually in Bombay today call bajro or bajra. Now, if you say this so casually in Gujarat, they will beat you. Because there is an enormous difference between bajro and bajri. Now, to those of us in the city, this is pearl millet, that is pearl millet. What difference does it make? But it makes an enormous difference. The difference is in what it's used for. Which one is used to make rotla? Which one is used to make debra? So, there is a difference in the kind of grain that you use and the kind of flour that you use. Nobody in the Kachch will use pre-milled bajra atta. There is a reason for this. Bajra atta deteriorates within 7 days of being ground. By the 8th day, bajra atta is decomposing. So when you buy bajra atta from a shop, which gives you a 3-month window to use it in, it's already dead. And its nutritional values have already gone down. Which is why today most modern Kachchhi houses have a mock mill, have a small chakki at home, so you don't have to go round and round with it and build bicep strength and tricep strength. You just pour it into your mock mill and it comes out as flour of the grade that you want. But the rotla and the lasanni chutney is the absolute midpoint of food in the Kachch. Added to this is imported jaggery. Jaggery is not from the Kachch. Sugarcane traditionally does not happen in the Kachch. So the Kachch would trade salt. I don't know how many of you all know, but Gujarat and the Kachch, where Kachch plays the bigger role, provides 75% of the salt that India consumes. 75% of Indian salt comes from Saurashtra and from Kachch, with the lion's share from the Kachch. So salt, garlic, jeera was the original chutney of the Kachch. No chilies were harmed in the making of chutney, because there were no chilies till the Columbian Exchange happened, And chilies really proliferated between 300 and 250 years ago into Gujarat and then into the Kachch. Today, of course, the Kachch grows a variety of its own chilies, from chilies that are used to give tadka to your curry, chilies that are used to make your famous lasagna chutney, chilies that are used for cooking. You will seldom ever see green chilies traditionally in Kachchi cooking. Chilies are grown, chilies are dried, and then chilies are used. Kachchi cooking is not for the faint of heart. It's like we tell people, India is not for beginners. Kachch is definitely not for beginners. Just good chutney and bhakri is something that you would eat day in and day out, 2 to 3 meals a day. More often than not, 2 meals a day. If you were working people and you ate 3 meals a day, you ate something called bajrani rab. Is there anybody here who's eaten bajrani rab? Arey wah! Arey, that's very heartening to see. Because bajrani rab has otherwise disappeared. It's all become makkani rab. Okay, so it's coarsely pounded pearl millet, which is cooked with buttermilk. And buttermilk is not dahi diluted with milk. Buttermilk is when you take milk and you make butter out of it and you have the residual. And the reason it is consumed is because it's intensely high in protein. This is what your whey protein is made out of. This is that stuff that you're scooping out of those large containers and going power building with when you're going to the gym. Just drink a liter of real chas a day instead of that diluted curd nonsense. So every single house has a buffalo. Very few houses have a cow. You have to be rich to own a cow in the Kachch. Buffaloes do better, and we know this for the last 4,500 years. Because on the side of Kotla Bhadli, we have evidence for milk being used and manufactured into different products 2,400 years ago by the Harappans. So telling us, though the Harappans ate cow meat, as in not female cattle, but male cattle, bullocks, it was buffaloes that were giving them their number one milk. Now you will have lots and lots of people tell you this absolute nonsense that, oh my God, cow milk, fantastic. Your spirituality will increase and your various things and things like that. All very fair. But cow milk, as far as its potential for helping your body is concerned, is here. Buffalo milk is here. And the reason for that is very simple. The best cow milk that you can buy, the best, has 4.5% fat. Okay? Now if you have hybrid cows, or if you are taking very good care and really have Gir cows, real Gir cows, not duplicate, you can bring it up to 6%. The worst buffalo milk in the world, the lowest quality is 6%. A good Mara buffalo will give you 10 to 11% fat per liter. You want to make butter, buttermilk and ghee, that buffalo is way ahead of the curve. We can argue about the Ayurvedic potential of cow milk till the cows come home. That is a different thing altogether. As far as your body is concerned, and the fact that fat is a very essential part of the food you need to eat, and that animal fat is far easily digested by the human body than any vegetable fat. So no amount of beautifully refined, non-refined, unrefined vegetable oil is really absorbed by your body the way butter and ghee are absorbed. Not to mention that no vegetable oil in the world has vitamin B9. Ghee does, in spades. So butter and ghee are what your body really need and not oil. And that's what the people of Kachch will tell you. That what do you put on your rotla? If you got fresh butter, you put butter. Otherwise, you put ghee. Traditionally, the ghee is stored for use in a beautiful vessel that looks like a teapot. Way before teapots were in use. So if you go to Leelpur near Rapar and you go to the crafts village, they will sell you these little teapots. There will be no milk jugs, no sugar pots, just little teapots. These teapots have been around for the longest time ever. because this is what you put the ghee that you're using in. And you put this teapot right next to your clay stove. Your beautiful horseshoe-shaped clay stove on the floor, you stick your teapot to it. This keeps the teapot warm and it keeps the ghee running out of it, so it can be poured without wasting any ghee, without putting any spoon into it. Okay? And it's little things like this that the food of the Kachch is about. The fact that you can cook everything in the Kachch in 3 vessels. 3 vessels is all it takes. 1 kadai, 1 pot, and 1 tawa. You're set. You need 1 dalni kachchi, which is usually actually a kadhi ni kachchi. And you need 1 slotted spoon for frying, which can also be used for your rice, and 1 flat spoon for your rotla. 3 vessels, 3 implements, a knife. You don't even need a rolling pin. Rotlas are made by hand. They're not rolled out. That's how easy it is to cook in the Kachch, because most of the people of Kachch have been nomads, semi-nomadic, and semi-sedentary, and you don't take too many things with you when you're moving. So from that kind of culture of living amongst semi-nomadic peoples, there is fewer things in your kitchen, there are fewer pieces of equipment that you use, and you maximize what you can do with those few things. Many years ago, I was working in Gujarat and in the Kachch, and one of my professors, who's now a very senior Harappan expert, Dr. Vasant Shinde, was asking me to translate. His Gujarati is far better today than it was then. And he was talking to a group of Meghwals. So these are essentially sheep-goat pastoralists. And they spend at least 6 months of the year moving around. And he said, will you talk to them and say that I'd like to go with them and document their process of movement and see how it is that they organize their trips and so on and so forth. It's a very complicated thing, not for today. But I remember the leader of the Meghwals, beautiful, incredibly handsome, tall gentleman with huge white mustachios, play with his mustachios like this. There was a big smile underneath his mustache. And he said, and I'll say it in Gujarati before I translate it, Sinde sahib ne kejo, ke jade chomasama varsad pade ni, kadai ma dal koi divas khatam na thai. So tell him that if he wants to come with us, to understand that in the rains, the dal in the kadai never gets over. So we'll be out in the rain, we'll be cooking in the rain, and it'll keep on drizzling into your food. And you'll all be dipping your rotlas into 1 kadai, and it'll look like the dal is never getting over, but just getting more dilute, thanks to the rain falling in it. So they're hardy people who live incredibly hardy, incredibly tough lives. They're also continuously moving across the landscape, and they're doing some of the most fascinating things. Today, potatoes and chilies have radically changed Kachchi cuisine. Your telia bataka, your lasagna bataka, none of it can be made without red chili powder or red chili paste. Potatoes are there in every walk of life. Where once the main available vegetable was brinjals, and brinjals. The people of the Kachch made a delicious variant of the bharta called the odho. Have all the Sindhis over here eaten odho or not? Sorry, Kachchis? Only 1 hand went up, 2, okay. 3, 4, 5, all have eaten. Good, thank God for that. So, a delicious dish. Do you see it anywhere when a Gujarati thali is made? No, Samirji, not at your house. But when you have a Gujarati thali that's served, nahi, ghare nahi, I'm talking about outside. Where do we see this food of the Kachch ever showcased? We have Kathiawadi food, we have Surti food, we have Ahmedabadi food when you talk about Gujarati food. Where is the Kachchi restaurant? But how much in Aram is Gujarati and how much in Aram? Chas. 1 day old chas is called Kachchi beer. By the way, if you drink a lot of it, you get very sleepy after lunch. So there's some stuff about it that's correct. So the people of the Kachch have used dry fruits and all kinds of dried ingredients to make some of their greatest dishes. So what is the greatest mithai from the Kachch? Pedo is just milk that is reduced. Not adadhya either. Right. Gulab Pak. Whether gulab petals don't come from the Kachch, whether dry fruit doesn't come from the Kachch, only the mavo comes from the Kachch. But it is such a unique dessert made with dried rose petals. And it is such a deliciously divine dessert that my mouth is definitely watering, and I haven't eaten it for more than 10 years. Okay? So I want to ask why the Kachch Center does not do Kachchhi lunch. Kachchhi lunch regularly. Chalo. So that's awesome to hear this. So the food of the... That's a fabulous idea. That's a really fabulous... There are dishes that can be sweet and savory at the same time. But ghee gudni rotli is, all over Western India. On the other hand, the people of Kachch have a very interesting variant of the khaja, which can be sweet and savory. Pakwan. This is not to be confused with the pakwan of Sindh. So you can have a salt and chili powder pakwan, and you can have hot pakwans dropped into sugar syrup. Okay? And they make a sweet dessert. So depending on which way you look at it, so many things can be used in multiple routes and multiple ways. Some of the best churma that I have eaten is made with bajri. Again, something that is disappearing. So much of this food is so simple, so on point, amazingly healthy. See, this is the thing that you've got to take away from it. It's amazingly healthy food. It's simple food. There are very few fresh ingredients. Because fresh ingredients weren't easily available. Okay? When there are, in the winter, everybody in Kachch eats things that are green. They grow their own tur dal and they eat lilwa till it's coming out of their ears. And they make a lilwani kachori, not gugra like the rest of the Gujaratis. There's that beautiful, large, round kachori that comes from the Kachch, which, again, I haven't seen in the last 30 years. But, ke sera sera. So, genuinely request all of you all to visit the Kachch and eat Kachchhi food in the Kachch. Visit those amazing chhatris in Bhuj, the fort at Lakhpat, the amazing Dhau building yards at Mandvi, to look at the sites of Dholavira and Surkotada, to visit the various different fossil parks, and to come and visit a part of India that is incredibly beautiful in its incredible simplicity. So thank you very much to Kachch Center and the Somaiya family. And let's do more stuff. Chala. Any questions, comments, anything?
Why do you refer it to the Kachch? Normally we say Gujarat and Kachch. So I'm very curious.
So, honestly, I don't see Kachch and Gujarat as being one. I'm sorry.
Why do you use the word the in front of Kachch? You say you go to Delhi or Madhya Pradesh or Maharashtra.
But you go to the United States. So it is it is grammatical, B, it is also, honestly on my part, a mark of respect for an area that I think has such enormous potential and is so unique that it needs to be separated and put into place. See, the Kachch was almost a state. Almost. It missed out statehood by this much. The history of the Kachch is very, very interesting for those who studied the history of the Kachch. The Kachch was 3 kingdoms. Then the three kingdoms were brought together by one amazing Kachchhi ruler called Pragmalji. Okay? He brought it together, and then you have a single dynasty ruling Kachch. You have some of the most beautiful silver coins that come out of the Kachch, called the Kachchhi Kauri. So I also have quite a few. And what you'll be surprised to know is that none of that silver is reused silver from anywhere in India. All of that silver comes in from the Gulf. So trade was the life's blood of the Kachchhi empire. Kachchhi kingdom existed on trade. And it was these dhow builders who went all over the place with their dhows. They traversed the entire Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, the Makran coast, the Arabian coasts. And one of the biggest exports was onions. So this is something that today we don't realize because we've got very different ways of shipping food. But the number one export from Gujarat and the Kachch on the dhows was onions. It was the Kachchhi onions, the Gujarati onions, the dhungli, which was eaten all over Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, the UAE, Oman. All of these regions ate onions that came from here. All the onions eaten there, till incredibly recently, went by dhow from India. And very interesting things came back. Some of them not very, how should we put it, officially. Like transistor radios, tape recorders, televisions, which were always unloaded in the night before the boats entered port in the morning, completely empty. And never mind that. But a lot of silver also came from there. For a very, very long time, Iranian silver was a huge source of silver for India. See, India doesn't really have its own silver. We don't have silver mines of our own worth talking about. But we have so much silver currency. So it's either the denarii of Rome or the various different coins, etc., coming in from Iran and from the Persian Empire that have been our sources of silver. So when you look at the kauris of Kachch, they're probably dinars of Harun al-Rashid and denarii of Rome that are all mixed up in them. 1960, in Mandui. Singdana also came with the Portuguese only, no? No Singdana. So, you know, the dabeli you're talking about was invented in 1960 by one specific gentleman, Munshi, I think his name was, in Mandui. Okay? Originally, not a single pomegranate was harmed in the making of Kachchhi dabeli. Which is why I love the original dabeli of the Kachch. Why they stick this jabardasti pomegranate into it, I can't understand. I don't like pomegranate, so I give it to you. I normally have to tell the guy not to put pomegranate, but in the Kachch, where we stop on our trip for dabeli, in the heart of the Kachch at Balasar, there is no pomegranate. So most of the silversmiths made coins into jewelry. See, women carried the wealth of the family, especially if you're nomads. The wealth of the tribe is worn by the women. So one of the very common things that was worn was something called a dinar mala, which were malas made out of coins. And the word dinar mala comes from the denarii of Rome. The denarius of Rome, going back to the Indo-Roman trade, that's where the name comes from. So silver coins with a hole punched in with a nail would be worn around the neck. And sadly, most of those are gone. You know, most of those beautiful ones are gone. Gorgeous silver anklets of different types. Kadas and anklets, both of them. Kachchhi women don't wear them any longer. Those beautiful yokes that they would wear around their necks, again all gone. Those amazing bangles of half a kilo, you know, and 1 kilo weight, the whole set, all gone. The bajubans, I don't see anybody from the Kachch wearing them any longer. And forget about the Rabaris or something who used to wear, shell and camel bone. So the times they change, fashions they change. Hopefully the Kachchhi cross stitch stays alive. So Jewellery basically is a very interesting deity who is the deity of Hindus, Muslims, somewhat Jains also as a sub-deity, and the entire, so this is again a Sindh-Kachch connection. So Jewellery basically comes up the river every year and he rides on a pala. So the pala is basically the hilsa basically. So he rides standing on a giant hilsa and he comes to this little island just before the Sukur Barrage. And the Muslims call him Lal Kalandar. He is the same guy who is Jewellery. He is also Peer. He is also other things. He was not really a god. He has been more and more deified over the last 200-300 years. And it's a very interesting, very syncretic thing. So Sindh and Kachch have had Muslims and Hindus living side by side, working side by side with no problem at all. You go to the Mandvi Kachch builders, Katan was just talking to me about this, and you will see Muslim craftsmen and Hindu craftsmen working side by side, shoulder to shoulder. There's no natak about tera chhaya mere pe pada or some nonsense like that, or you drank my water. None of that. You're working together. There is incredible symbiosis. What your faith is your faith. It's at home, not where you're working. Food is sent to each other's houses because they don't eat in each other's houses traditionally. So Muslim families will send raw food over to the Hindu friends. So rice, bajro, dal will be sent over when there's a wedding in a Muslim family. And in a vegetarian Hindu family, they will actually send food over. So there is a very, very interesting syncretic relationship. So at the island, I forget the name now, I'm getting old, hard disk has got bad sectors. You will have Kalandars performing side by side with Sindhi Hindus. So a lot of Punjabis also believe in him. So he is a patron of, the environment, etc. to a large extent. The Sukur and Rohri barrage has changed the Indus, the lower portion of the Indus tremendously. Water just doesn't come down, and the Indus for almost 30 kilometers from its mouth is saline for most of the year. Because fresh water has stopped coming because the dams being used for, farming. In India, we have an amazing pod of dolphins that lives in a dam that we didn't even know were there for a very long time. So in the Punjab, there is a beautiful dam. I think it's on the Beas, if I remember right. And there is a large pod of dolphins that got trapped when they were building the dam. So there's a massive pod of dolphins, Indus dolphins that live over there. And they're now completely happily settled over there. That's their scene. So again, these modern boundaries are man-made boundaries. These modern political boundaries. Some of the most beautiful Jain and Hindu temples in the Kachchhi style are found just across into what is Sindh. The Tharparkar region of Sindh has some amazing temples with some amazing paintings. And the Sindh Antiquities Department is trying very hard to preserve it and conserve it as best as they can. So, we need to stop fear-mongering and doing this whole political thing. And I don't know, I think when you eat each other's food, you don't kill each other. It's one of the surest ways of not killing somebody when you share food with them. There was a lady, yes. Yes. So Hilsa basically lives in the sea. It only spawns in the river. So the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea both have Hilsa. It is called Pala. Okay? It's only called Hilsa when it runs upriver to spawn. Okay? And similarly in the Indus. So the Indus and the Ganga share a lot of species that come into it from the sea, share a lot of, so the Gangetic dolphin and the Indus dolphin are the same dolphin species. They're blind as bats because of the murky water. They use only echolocation. Most of the species of turtles are also the same. So it's humans who divide things, not nature. There was one of the young ladies had a hand up. Mewad. So, कोई बनाता ही नहीं है ना आजकल. और ये जो गुजराती पतली कढ़ी होती है वो कच्छ और राजस्थान में नहीं खाई जाती है. वहाँ की कढ़ी होती है वो गाढ़ी होती है. It is a much thicker curry. And the kadima dabka which you will have from this region will always be with dried methi. So because fresh methi कहाँ से मिलने वाला है? So and dabka wali automatically will suck in extra water from the kheer and make the kheer thicker. So there is a lot of similarity in this entire region. So caravans would go from Gujarat, from your, say from Vadnagar, would go straight into Udaipur and then Srinathji and that region. Another route would go into Abu. A third route would turn into your little run of Kachch. What is that famous chokdi over there? Radhanpur chokdi. From the Radhanpur chokdi, they would turn into the Kachch. So routes coming out of Gujarat would come straight up from Shamlaji and Vadnagar and all that, and then split into multiple directions. Traders coming from the north would also do the same thing. And these northern traders would hug the Aravalis on the inside of the Aravalis, the Indian side of the Aravalis, because the other side is very inhospitable. So they'd be coming down all the way from Rajasthan and from Punjab and coming by the land route. And these are the old Harappan trade routes. So the Harappans were in the Kachch for a long time before they went to Saurashtra. Saurashtra used to be an island. I know, difficult for us to believe today, but Saurashtra used to be an island. There were local Bronze Age cultures in Saurashtra who were doing their own business. When the full-fledged Harappans landed there, you know, they just came there and they plonked themselves down. So there is no evolution of the Harappan in Gujarat. They arrived there and then they devolved. They didn't evolve in Gujarat. And what we call the Sorat Harappan and so on and so forth, and the Anartha culture of the Little Run of Kachch area, and the Kachchhi culture. So in the Kachch, you see an entire development of the Harappans. You see the early Harappan phase in the Kachch, which is local to the Kachch, and which then amalgamates into the wider Harappan culture. So much of that, they used to grow wheat. They had water management that will scare the hell out of people today. Water management that can be duplicated today. Does anybody know how many rivers there are in Kachch? There are 92 rivers in Kachch. Now you'd wonder where those damn rivers are. So most of them are seasonal. They carry water during the rains. What the Harappans figured out was how to do large-scale water harvesting. And they would do open water harvesting. So, you know, water harvesting where the sun is regularly dehydrating your water source. So they would do it in such deep, such large dams that it's unbelievable. I mean, if the Kachch studies people want, I'll come sometimes and talk just about Dholavira and the water management at Dholavira. And it's scary. They cut through solid rock to make an emergency tank. So if all the other water dries up, there should still be enough drinking water. On the entire city of Dholavira, in the mature Harappan phase, there was one well, just one well in the citadel complex. The water that was drunk by the people of Dholavira was rainwater that was harvested. That one well was for extreme emergencies. But for slightly less extreme emergencies, they had what is called the deep tank in the annex. They cut through rock. When you look at it today, you're thinking that they did this with just copper bronze tools. And you're wondering how they have these, it's like they took a laser and sliced through it. So at one point between the two layers of limestone there was a sometimes you get a lens of clay. So the water would drain out from there. So what they did was first they hollowed it out a little bit. Then they made little rectangular pieces of limestone and they started building up a little Lego wall inside that lens. It's built so well that we can't put a razor blade between those stones today. 4,500 bloody years later, we can't put a razor blade between those stones. That's how tightly they packed in that gap. They created for the extreme elite an entire refrigerator for cold water. When we excavated it, it took us a year to figure out what it was that they had built, because it made no sense, till we kind of reverse engineered it in our heads and realized what it was. It's a tank from here to the end of the stage, and about from this foot of mine till here. And that entire tank is made with slabs, double-layered slabs with very sticky clay in between them. So when from the well you fill the tank, enough water seeps out between the large slabs to wet the clay. As the clay water is seeping into the local ground, it creates a temperature differential. And the water gets about 7 to 8 degrees cooler. I mean, just because they could. I was about to say that, yes. Yeah. The tragedy is that it's also full of kachra. No? Okay, because the one time I visited it in the 90s, there were plastic water bottles floating in it. Arey, Tera is such a beautiful fort. And the Tera fort is gently decaying after the 2001. Okay, the Jadejas are fighting with each other. Yeah. Yeah, from the hills. And it's the gradient. They figured out the gradient, they figured out the waterway, they figured out where to place these tanks so that the water comes in, overflows. So, if you talk to older people, they'll tell you that the first tank is not for people. I don't know, but the first tank is not for people to drink from. That's for animals. So you say, why? It's the same water. It's not. You see, in the first tank, it overflows into the second tank, and then from the second to the third. When it fills the first tank, the water has a bed load, a sediment load which settles. So that water is kept for animals, and the other two tanks are kept for human consumption. So sedimentation and removal of sediment was something that they were doing in the medieval period, the early medieval period. Yeah. And, these are the places that we should take people to. These are the things that people need to see. And I'll tell you this, there are tons of beautiful dharamsalas all over Kachch. So accommodation is not a problem if you're willing to rough it out a little bit. And the dharamsalas are huge, thick, massive walls. They're very cool inside. You just have to take your own Odomos with you. Unless you want to make blood donation, but then that's your choice. So, the Kachch is a phenomenal landscape. It has the most amazing and highly resilient people. Sadly, and with due respect, you see the intelligentsia of Kachch and the upper echelons of Kachch moved out of the Kachch because there were better business opportunities in the cities. So Rajkot, Ahmedabad, Baroda, Surat, Mumbai, Karachi. Karachi was Mumbai presidency. Kachch was Mumbai presidency. So all of these people who moved out, they kind of ended up devaluing the Kachch slightly. So the vibrancy of the Kachch became a little faded because the most intelligent people in the Kachch at one time left the Kachch because there were very few opportunities. Luckily, after the 2001 earthquake, the Gujarat government gave the people of Kachch a 15-year tax window to set up business. So you might not be very excited about it because a lot of the business was lignite and things like that because Kachch is very rich in minerals. But that brought a lot of Kachchis back home to Kachch. And that's made a lot of difference. But I think rural Kachch needs much more help because people are just abandoning it. I'll give you one example of how it can be done. The Maldaris of the Kachch, who are buffalo pastoralists, the Center for Pastoral Studies, Ahmedabad, did a long-term interaction with young Maldaris who they found were working not in the animal husbandry business any longer. They'd left the animal husbandry business for better pay and things like that, and they were not satisfied with what they were doing. They felt that they were undervalued in these new occupations, that they were looked down upon. And they felt that they had no pride in these new jobs that they did because they weren't allowed to be proud of these jobs. So the Center for Pastoral Studies said, okay, let's sit down and look at what we can do for these boys. If these boys want to get back into the pastoral life, how can we give them a better livelihood? So they did something very interesting and very unique, and I'm incredibly impressed by them for doing it this way. They brought a group of young, sadly men only, because it's a very misogynistic society. You need to break down those barriers slowly. They brought a lot of young men together, and they took them to RA. And they showed them everything that can be done with milk. Condensed milk, butter, ghee, cheese, chocolate, powdered milk. They said all these things can be done with milk. Now, what would you like to be trained in? So they did a deep dive. They came out, and they were asked, what is it that you want to start making? And what blew the Center for Pastoral Studies' minds was they wanted to make cheese. So I said, you want to make cheese? Yeah, we don't want to make Amul cheese. We don't want to make that. That is not cheese. We want to make real cheese. So they got in touch with Namrata from Kachchhi Cheese in Chennai. And she came down and did a 2-month conservancy with these boys. For 2 months, they sat and talked about how to make cheese and experimented on making cheese with sheep milk, camel milk, and buffalo milk. I don't know how many of you all know there is a breed of camel called the Khari camel or the Khairi camel. They live in the Banni area and they do not drink water. They only eat the grasses that grow around the marshes. Their milk is salty. I kid you not. You have to just drink that milk and 2 glasses of camel milk next to each other, and you will immediately be able to tell which is from the Khairi camels. They had almost disappeared. They've come back with a vengeance because suddenly people are all for marketing camel milk as being diabetic friendly, and people who have lactose problems, camel milk works with them, and so on and so forth. And it is very, very healthy milk. It's always been. Camel herders have been very happy drinking it all these years, and now they're selling it also. So they started making cheese, and I was actually called down to Ahmedabad to taste the first batch of cheeses they made. And I'll tell you, a couple of them, not all, some were misses. But there were more hits than misses, and a couple of them could have been put in any fromagerie in Europe and been highly appreciated. One was a camel milk cheese. They made a soft sheep's milk cheese, which was like any fresh sheep's milk cheese from France or Italy. And they made a pecorino-style cheese, and something that I didn't even know existed. So there is a wild saunf that grows in Kachch. It grows wild, and you can smell it when you're going with your animals. So these kids collected that and brought it, and they infused the pecorino with wild saunf. It was fabulous. They slightly overdid it, but that's something that So if in 2 months of learning and 2 months of work after that, they could put something like this out, it's possible to rechannelize the youth to keep doing traditional things and make them economically viable and make them proud of what their ancestors did and what they are doing. So, you can bring that circle around completely. It's possible to do. It takes time. There will be some misses. Every time is not a hit. But by asking them more often than not what they want, instead of telling them, we'll tell you what you want. No, you don't understand what they want. You come from an urban setting. You need to ask them what they want. Show them the options. Then let them choose. It gives them much more pride. So it can be done, and it can be worked out. And I know that Kachchhi is now selling a couple of cheeses that these kids are making. So, if that shows you that the Kachch can be revived. It's just up to us to decide what we want to do with it. Anybody else? No questions from this side? Why? We don't eat cheese. No? We don't like lasagna bataka.
inadvertent that we sort of have generic histories of regions, generic culinary histories of regions. So I'm just curious to know about how it actually pans out across, say, caste identities. And I'm also talking because I come from Goa, and when we talk about Goan cuisine, it's a certain kind of cuisine that's privileged, which is the Saraswat or Catholic. There are several other cuisines that are
Forgotten.
so I'm just curious about how it pans out.
So I'll tell you this, what I have done is generically looked at Kachchhi cuisine. Kachchhi cuisine will be different in the upper caste and the lower caste to a certain degree, but not very much. Because ultimately the ingredients are that many only. And there are only that many things that you can do with that many ingredients. So the Kachch actually has its own, okay, forgive me, everybody over here on the left-hand side, its own kind of undihu, okay, which is not exactly an undihu, but it is an incredible mixed vegetables in which a lot of tuar dana is used and a lot of brinjal is used, okay, but it is not the undihu of Gujarat, and it is often a red masala instead of a green masala. I see somebody nodding over there, right? What do you call it? Sambaryun. So, so you can make dishes. You can reach out and link things, and you can see where there are similarities. So a lot of these dishes, it's also called ghadyu, because it's made in a ghado. The fun thing is you bung everything together in one pot and you forget about it. It's incredibly on the coast are all cooked like this. We put everything in a pot, put it on coals, put some coals on the lid and forget about it. Or you bury the thing halfway into a pit full of coals. So, depending on your economic strength, certain things will be more and certain things will be less. So you will have more ghee in an upper caste house. You will have less ghee in an upper caste house. You will have more chilies in a lower caste house, less chilies in an upper caste house. So these things are there. But today the food of the Kachch has become enormously homogenized. Really, I'm not kidding you. That any Kachchhi can virtually eat at any Kachchi's house, and I'm saying vegetarian Kachchis basically, and be completely at ease with the food and the flavors. Again, there are limited ingredients. There is only that much that you can do with that many things. Curd, chas, dahi, not getting there yet. Curd, chas, dahi, and kadhi. That's one thing. Kanda, lasan, bataka is one thing. Dried vegetables, another thing. Ringna, another thing. So at some point you start running out of options. And that is the great unifying factor in the Kachch more than anything else. The Kachch has a lot of meat traditions, very interesting meat traditions, and has specific goat breeds which were bred for the table. And interestingly, there are a lot of Hindus who eat meat also in the Kachch. The Menons, Memon to be precise, are all Lohanas. Okay. There you go. There you go. So, basically, they are the same people. They are the same people. Their vegetarian food and the vegetarian food of the Lohanas is almost identical. And they speak Kachchi only. Memni they call it. There are a few variations. So, it's like, when Kachchi is written in the Arabic script, which is the most common. There are actually two other scripts that Kachchi was written in, okay, which have completely died. When Kachchi is written in the Arabic script, there are some 8 alphabets which are unique to Kachchi, which don't exist in Arabic because Arabic does not have those phonemes. So similarly, when you switch to Persian, there are k, f, etc. is added, And I remember because I excavated the site of Sanjan and we had these coins of the Amirs of Sindh. And I was showing them at a conference where there were a couple of linguists. And they said, oh, that's Sindhi, not Arabic. So I was like, yeah, but Arabic written in Sindhi, Sindhi written in Arabic. I said, no, there are variations, and which are unique to Sindhi, which identify this variant as Sindhi, not as Arabic. Again, most Sindhis don't write their own script any longer, so they've all switched, in India they've all switched to Gujarati. No, Sindhi kadhi and Kachchhi kadhi are not the same. Completely different. All Kachchhi kadhis that I know of, please correct me if I'm wrong, have curd or chas in them. Whereas the Sindhi kadhi has none of this. It is a besan-based kadhi. It's also delicious. And there are similarities because this kadhi also has besan in it and vegetables in it very often, but it's not the same thing. Yes. So Sindhis are some fascinating food. You know, Sindhis are the first people in India to use seitan, which is now such a big health food. So basically you take dough and you wash dough till you separate only the gluten from it. So the Sindhis have been making it forever. It's called Mukundwadi. I have been trying to find it in the Kachch because logically it should exist here also, but I have never been able to find it. So there are some very interesting things like this. That is what I said. There are 2 more scripts, and we've stopped using them completely. But there are manuscripts in them. Chalo, I have far exceeded my time. So before Yamini comes and beats me up, she's got angry and left, I think. Chala. Thank you very much again to Somaiya Vidyavihar and the Kachch Study Center.
Your felicitation. So, I would like to call the Chancellor of Somaiya Vidyavihar University, Shree Somaiya and Amrita Somaiya to please be here. And I would also want to call Lata Ben Karani, Reena Ben Lodaya, Kashmira Ben Churla, and Savitha Suri on stage. It's a token of our appreciation. Thank you for your time, effort, and scholarship. Just wait 1 second. Yeah, we just wait here. Yeah, we'll just do the. Yeah, come. Savitha Suri. Yeah, just. While you have the chance. Acho. From the Sarvoday Mandal Trust. So along with scholarship, we also have people from the community who are representing the jewellery of Kachch, which we'll hear about now. Much Kurush Dalal for making us all hungry for Kachchhi food. Don't forget there's dabili outside, so you must have that. But the lecture is not over. The fun continues. We have an interesting take on the jewellery of Kachch, and that is followed by the textiles of Kachch. So we have with us Lata Ben Karani and Reena Ben Lodaya. They are from the Sarvoday Mandal. Kashmira Ben Churla. Sarvoday is a Sanskrit word which is comprised of two terms, Sarva, which means all, and Uday, which means rising. Standing true to its name, Shree Kachchhi Dasa Oswal Sarvoday Mandal focuses its energies towards physical, mental, and spiritual upliftment of one and all. They have been working tirelessly towards medical initiatives, which includes the dialysis project, the book donation drive, blood donation drive. On education front is for textbook Sahai. For citizen welfare, there's a distribution of Anaj kits, Sarvoday Sampada donation of usable items. On health and fitness, there's the nature camp at Kachchh in Bidada. The religious activities include the monthly Mahakali Mataji Bhavna. And there are other activities like the Saraswati Samman, the annual celebration of Panji Darohar. And this year, Sarvoday Mandal celebrates 60 years of their glorious work. And with that, I want to invite them and share the legacy of Kachchhi jewelry. So on view are the jewelries which are absolutely ancient and traditional jewelry of Kachch. It's very rare to find such jewelry in common parlance in jewelry shops. So what you will get to see here just now is very, at times you won't find to see it anywhere else. So it'll be interesting for you to understand what our jewelry heritage is like.
थैंक यू। जय जिनेंद्र, प्रणाम। ये कच्छ का कच्छी कम्युनिटी का ज्वेलरीज है। कच्छ बहुत बड़ा है, बहुत सारे कम्युनिटीज़ है, उसमें ये कच्छी कम्युनिटी का है। और इसमें जो गोल्ड का यूज़ 8000 साल पहले से हो रहा है और अभी 7130 साल से ज्वेलरी के रूप में यूज़ हो रहा है। और इसका जो है गोल्ड इसलिए यूज़ होता था, एक तो लेती देती और विजडम, स्टेटस, लव, रिलेशनशिप, ये सब में गोल्ड, ज्वेलरी और गोल्ड सब यूज़ हो सकता था। और जो चंदन हार है उसका जो हिस्ट्री जो है, राम भगवान के शादी में कौशल्या माता ने सीता को पहनाया था चंदन हार, तब से चंदन हार चलित है। और चंदन हार जो है 150 ग्राम्स लेके 200 तोला, 300 तोला, बहुत सारे वजन से होता था। अब जैसे जैसे भाव बढ़ गया, अभी वो कम वजन में भी कर रहे हैं, जैसे 100 ग्राम्स, 150 ग्राम्स, 40 ग्राम्स ऐसे। जौहर जो है उसमें अनाज का एक वीट का बीट डिज़ाइन लिया हुआ है। और जो चंदन हार है उसमें फ्लावर्स है, बट मोगरे में मोगरे का कली है, दाड़म गोटा में दाड़म का बीज का डिज़ाइन है। मीन्स ऐसे नेचर के साथ कनेक्टेड ज्वेलरीज है, सब एनिमल्स है, फ्लावर है, पत्ते है। मीनाकारी में सब कलर से क्लाउड्स के ब्लू, ऑरेंज, रेड। और जो पर्ल्स आते हैं, पर्ल्स जो है बसरा मोती, सबसे ऊंचा और सबसे रियल मोती, वो जो है साउथ ईस्ट से पहले आता था, पर्सिया वहाँ से, लाइक खाका मोती, कल्चर मोती, चाइना मोती, जापान मोती, वो सब बाद में इंट्रोड्यूस हुए। बसरा मोती सबसे पहले आया। उसके बाद नवलखा हार, नवलखा हार जो है दरभंगा में पहले बनता था, राजा महाराजाओं ने पहना था। उसके बाद कच्छी कम्युनिटी ने इसको स्टार्ट किया पहनने का, जो एक स्टेटस सिंबल था, जो राजा महाराजा इनके घर में पहले होता था। अब तो वज़न कम में भी सब पहन सकते हैं, सबके घर में निकल सकता है ऐसा। और उसके बाद है रानी हार, जो एक स्टेटस है, जो लड़कियों को शादी में देते थे, या ससुराल वाले बहू के लिए बनाते थे या बेटियों के लिए माँ बाप बनाते थे। जैसे उससे एक उनका जो स्टेटस है, वो वेल्थ उनका कितना है, वो सब उसमें प्रेजेंट होता था। और उसके बाद आता है सांकड़ा हार है, तोरण माला है, पंख हार है, लविंग हार है, इलायची का डिज़ाइन, बहुत सारे अपने कम्युनिटी में सभी को कवर किया है, जो भगवान ने दिया है। नेचर, जौ है, चावल है, सभी अनाज, सभी फ्रूट, सब में कुछ ना कुछ ज्वेलरी में पार्ट लेके बनाते थे। मोती, नवरत्न और डायमंड्स जो थे इंडिया के गोलकंडा में बहुत अच्छे बनते थे। खंबात अखात के अपने नवरत्न हार, सेमी प्रीसियस स्टोन, ये सब इंडिया में ही बनता था। हैदराबाद के पल्स अभी फेमस है। ये एक कच्छी ट्रेडिशन का जौहर, चंदन हार, तोरण माला, ये सब बहुत ही फेमस और 7000 सालों से चल रहे, ये सब चलित है। जैसे जैसे भाव बढ़ता गया वैसे वैसे कम प्राइस में भी अभी बन रहा है। ये अपना हिस्ट्री है कच्छी कम्युनिटी का। ये सब ज्वेलरी ऑलमोस्ट सबके घर में कुछ ना कुछ तो निकल ही आता है, ऐसा सबके घर में रहता ही है। थैंक यू सो मच।
I, on behalf of Shree KDO Jain Sarvoday Mandal Mulund, we, Lata Karani and myself, Kashmira Churla, we give a heartfelt gratitude to Yaminisha for inviting us and giving us this beautiful platform with the amazing audience so that we can showcase what actually was the past of the community ladies used to wear. And in this PPT, not only the female stuff, we have included the males, jabba ka button, kurta buttons, and all. Even the watches first were made of gold with minakari designs. All the designs in our community's jewelry were basically taken from the nature. Some, like we say, Simora, in which it is a, what do you say, it is basically a bangle which has, you know, they are joined with the head of the lion. But Mogra, what she said, we has actually a bangle with everything, bud of a Mogra. So I just thank Yamini ji for giving us this platform and inviting us to showcase our tradition. Once again, thank you.
Thank you.
It is important to have an academic discussion. It's equally important to engage with the community and to ensure that the people that we are doing this for are equally involved in what we are doing, and it gets passed on to their generations altogether. So they have been doing a lot of work for social welfare, social service, and one of their last programs had all of this heritage preservation of folk songs that Kachchhis sing in weddings, in rituals, and they had all done this in a play form. I think once we can have that entire show. It was beautifully done with almost 50 participants, and they had created an entire play around it. They had done the fashion show of all the traditional chanya choli and Kachchhi bharat and all of that. And there was also this jewelry presentation. So I requested if they could bring up something today so that we have something from the community that can be represented for all of us. And now, did someone take my paper with them? Okay, so Savitha, where is she? Every time I call someone, they have gone to the washroom. Yeah, no, even Shalini. So the last time we had a show not actually a show, we had an exhibit of the artisanal work that is done in Somaiya Vidya, and we had artisans come over from Kachch. And the interesting thing after that 3-day exhibit was that there was one woman who had the courage to come up, and she actually spoke on the stage for the first time. All these artisans, when they arrived in Mumbai, they had sleepless nights because they had to face an audience. And here we are so happy that we could do this for them, that we had people from all across come over and listen to them and to give them this backing that they needed. They performed a beautiful folk band which they have created on their own, and they sat here and owned it, and they regaled the audience like no one other. So such has been the kind of awakening, a kind of going back, nostalgia that we are trying to do with Kachch. And with that, I hope Savitha should be here soon. Savitha is a person who works hard on textiles. She has this initiative called Anvaya, and through that she actually documents a whole lot of saris in their old form, new form, and how it's going on contemporary, and in what ways can we revive them, restore them. She works beautifully with all of these embroidery works, and till she comes here, I think since we have heard so beautifully about food, I'm going to connect food and embroidery with poetry. So, Savitha, you're late. Now I'm beginning my poem. Mud walls line her house, cooks with muddy water left for her by sand mafia. Her meal of coarse rice and watery dal is made on wood fire. Treks for miles on parched earth, dehydrated by sun. She swallows her spittle. Metallic demons replace muscle. Blankly offers a bowl of chai. So that's what the cuisine of Kachch is, and that's what Kurush spoke to us about, that it needs to have a whole lot of water, each of these meals. And before, I'm going to give you, I'm going to set the mood for what you have to say with a poem called Embroidered. An expressive puncture, a soof here, a chobario there, squatting outside hutments, resisting lonesome patriarchy, with giggles, needling, kneading, dying, tying, a pinch of taste, in sine waves, panoramic famine and polychromatic aesthetics, a not quite nominal warp and weft, yet total. Dilettantish bonhomie, an emotional anchor down long virile absences, intimacies of the weave, eternally salted mirage of the mind, unhinged. And with that, can we have Savitha Suri?
Thank you all for calling me here, and it feels good to be back here because, in a sense, Somaiya feels like home because I teach at Somaiya Kala Vidya, so it feels a lot like home. I was also lucky that I'd seen the works of Jyoti Bhatt at the Museum of Art and Photography in Bangalore, which has a permanent exhibit of his photographs, and I can't tell you how much this documentation actually means to us today, and I'll come to that in some time. But I want to start with two things. One, I'm grateful that he spoke before me because he set the context to a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. There is a considerable overlap between what he spoke and what I will be talking about today. But I'll start with a little story. Y'all are familiar with the Sanjay Gandhi National Park? Y'all are also familiar with the fact there are about 3,000 Varlis living inside the national park close to the core forest area, right? Now, in one of these villages called Navapada, there is a young Varli artist. He's the only male artist in this side of Bombay. Yeah, all the artists come from Thane side. He's the only artist in this side of Bombay. And I have worked with him for a number of years. And I stay very close to the national park. So until a couple of years ago, I would spend at least 4-5 hours a week inside the forest with him wandering. And what I learned from him are too big to be listed out here, but he'd shown me a tree, which is a silk cotton tree. It looks like, you know, the fiber inside when you break the pod is silken fibers, white like cotton. And he broke that pod, and when he broke it, there was a white resin that came out. And he said, you know, this is the resin with which we trap birds to eat. And when we break the pod, it releases all this fibrous material, which is like silk, which we trap and use to make mattresses and pillows as stuffing. But also, when we leave some of them in the air, they are pollinating. Yeah? So he said, but that was not what was interesting. What was interesting is the lesson he brought out from that. He said, because life and death are two sides of a coin. What gives life will also give death. This is the entire life cycle that we go in. So what is born will die, sometimes by the same hands that gives birth to it. The act of breaking the pod kills one living being, but also allows for another to be generated at a point in time. Now, I want this thought to stay because my theme today, at least the topic that I chose to speak on, was on threads of resilience, which is the textiles of Kachch. And I will not be talking about the history of each of these textiles because that, I think, is for another day. There are other platforms, there are other ways of finding out about it. What I want to talk about today is how did these textiles actually evolve historically? What were the reasons that led to it? And where do we stand today? And the next 50 years, what are we looking at when we're thinking Kachch textiles? Which is why this documentation is incredibly important because a lot of what you see in those pictures is not what you will see in Kachch today. It's gone forever. Today, when you look at photographers going to Kachch, it's an incredibly curated setup. You have paid models coming from different communities. A community member will be the guide. Photographers will take their ultra-sophisticated lenses, go out. The shoots are planned. Lighting is perfect because everything's arranged for. They're wearing the right kind of accessories and clothes that will give them the India exotic look, not necessarily authentic Kachchhi. It just needs to look exotic India and somewhere some resemblance to Kachch. And these are the photographs that you will see out there on Instagram, social media, because everyone who owns a phone today is a photographer. Everyone who owns a digital camera is a professional photographer. There is a difference. Phone se loge to amateur photographer, digital camera hai to you're a professional photographer. So this kind of documentation is incredible, not only because a lot of this has disappeared, but also because this is probably the most authentic portrayal of Kachch and its people that we have. And by default, of the jewelry, of the textiles, and of the lifestyle of the people of Kachch. Which is why I think this is very important. So thank you for bringing this to Bombay. I hope more people come here to see this. But coming back to Kachch, for those of you who heard Kurush speak, the landscape is very, very harsh. Drought, earthquake prone, every day is a struggle. Add to that the fact that people are primarily nomadic and migratory in nature. Yeah, the indigenous tribes of Kachch have been nomadic pastoralists and they have been migratory in nature. These two factors give rise to two traits which we see in the evolution of Kachchi textiles. One is exposure. Two is resilience. When you have your back to the wall and you have no other option left but to fight for your survival, you will do everything in your power using whatever little is available to you to survive. That's exactly what the Kachchi communities are doing today as well. When I say today, I mean as of 2001. The Bhuj earthquake. I do not see any other district or craft cluster in the country that is as craft rich, craft diverse, and as resilient as Kachch. And we saw evidence of this in 2020. When COVID struck, and artisan communities had to quite literally go out with their arms outstretched for donations. The only craft cluster in the country that was not asking for donations for themselves was Kachch. Only they were not asking for donations because they were sufficiently well off. This entrepreneurial spirit of theirs has its root in their resilience. That when you have only X amount to live with and you don't know when you can replenish that, you are going to be very, very careful. You are going to make it last as long as you can. And you're trying to also see how can I grow this into a little bigger so my struggle for survival extends a little bit. You know, I can just last out a few more days. Ek hafta jo chalega, wo 2 hafte tak kheench lenge. The second reason why Kachchi textiles have evolved to where they are today is the exposure. When you are nomadic pastoralists, you are moving through different landscapes. You are meeting different kinds of people. What this gives Kachchi craftspersons today is this amazing quality we do not see in many other clusters. It is the ability to understand people outside their community. When you are moving from one landscape into another, you have no idea who the people will be, what they will be like, whether you are seen as hostile, whether you're going to be welcomed. You have no idea how long you can stay in your new landscape. What is your first instinct? Your first instinct is to observe the new people you are going to meet. The second thing you are going to do is adapt. Adapt so that you are not confronting these people because you have no choice but to live there for a certain period of time. Exposure also came by way of trade, which Kurush again spoke of, so I will not rehash that. But extensive trade connections. Extensive trade connections meant two things for textiles specifically. One, the design language kept evolving. They did not just look at their immediate environment for inspiration, but they had no choice but to look at what their customers wanted. They had to design for this customer that they would not physically see, but send through a middleman on a ship. They also borrowed design traditions. A lot of what we see in Kachch today, including the Ajrak, comes to us from Persia. Persia, Sindh, onward to Kachch. You borrow traditions, you borrow design languages. With that migratory nature comes this fabulous understanding of human beings. Who are these people? How are they going to behave? And I'll tell you a little story. I teach at Somaiya Vidya at both their campuses, Kachch and Bagalkot. It's fascinating to see the difference in how the students actually approach. I teach a particular module called market orientation, which is not marketing. My module is about teaching artists to look at the market and understand the different kinds of customers that they may be meeting and the different kinds of textile designs and textiles that they will have to design for these various customer segments. That's condensed. So we do a field trip for our students, which is a 3-day field trip to Ahmedabad in the case of Kachch and to Bangalore in the case of Karnataka, Bagalkot. When we go to Ahmedabad, it's a 3-day intensive trip. They do 18 places in 3 days. We leave at night from our campus, reach Ahmedabad at unearthly hours of some 2, 3 in the morning, and the kids have to be ready by 7 to leave. And we get back only at 10 in the night. These 18 places will include malls, boutiques, high-end designer stores, retail outlets, individuals, museums. It's a mix, yeah? What is mind-blowing is that not one of the students will ask any questions. Before they leave, I teach them research methodology because we do SWOT analysis after we come back. They're taught observation techniques, they're taught interview techniques before they leave, and they have to write all of this down. But before the first visit, what I get them to do is walk around the neighborhood in teams and just write down what you see. You have to write down, that's not negotiable. They carry books with them, they have to write down everything that they see. And I remember this particular team that went out, they came back and told me, you know, the people living in this neighborhood are upper middle class people. Wo log na, they're not going to buy from us outright. They only look like, you know, they have a lot of money, but they're going to weigh very carefully and they'll buy one thing. They're not lavish spenders. I said, so what made you come up with that thing? Because you didn't meet any of the residents. He says, they're selling apples on the cart. I said, why would that actually impact? He said, because if it was middle class, they would sell bananas. Apples are very upper middle class. Only upper middle class people buy apples. That kind of insight comes to you only in Kachch, nowhere else in the country. It comes with centuries of trying to understand people and coexisting with them. Your first step is to understand, to coexist. Then you understand to collaborate. Because once you start living in a place, you'll have to earn your livelihood somehow. How are you going to earn a livelihood in what was a non-cash economy, what was a barter economy? Which is how the Meghwal weaving community started weaving. Because they had pastoralists. I can get wool from these sheep pastoralists. I can get milk from the people who have cows and livestock. But those people who have wool on their sheep don't know how to weave it, but I know how to weave it. We'll do a trade-off. When your primary mode of earning a livelihood is barter, it will always be collaborative in nature, not competitive. You cannot afford being competitive. It has to be collaborative. And centuries of working in that manner have led to what we today call syncretic traditions of Kachch and its culture. The sari that I'm wearing today is an interesting one because it's woven by a very young student who just graduated in December. He's the first from his village to join Somaiya Vidyavihar to complete a course in design education. So he first wove the sari in what is now called the bhujodi style of weaving, on which surface embellishment has been done by a bandhani artist, again a young artisan designer who's just graduated. Their first instinct was to collaborate with each other, which means they need to understand each other extremely well. In order to bring this piece out, the bandhani artist has to communicate, I need to do this, so you need to weave it exactly like this. They need to be very, very clear about their communication and their end goal. It's centuries of working like this that has led to something like this come very, very effortlessly. It is almost natural when you look at them in a classroom setting. And these are 16 to 22-year-olds. They're really, really young kids. They're not very old. But the thing with Kachch textiles is this, that years of exposure and international trade, and I say international trade because the oldest surviving textile fragments that we have from the region are the Fustat textiles that were found in Cairo. And the Fustat textiles were used as furnishing, coffin cloths, swaddle cloths, all in madder and indigo, natural dyes, hand block printed in this region. If you look at the textile scraps available today of the Fustat textiles, it is very rightly said that the cloth may tear, but the color will not fade. That is a tribute to the mordanting skills of the dyers in Gujarat, Kachch. Kachch specifically because of hand block printing. If a tradition of, say, the most common example you see of Kachch textiles, it starts with the priest king of Mohenjo-daro. The trefoil pattern on the shawl is believed to be ajrak. The kakad motif or the cloud motif of ajrak is supposed to be on the shawl of the priest king, the bust of the priest king of Mohenjo-daro, which is something we study in school as well. That picture is embedded in our consciousness. If an association goes back that far, and it lasts even today, it's a living tradition. It's an unbroken, handcrafted textiles of Kachch have an unbroken tradition of 5,000 years, starting with hand spinning to hand block printing. There's a clear line which just does not take a break anywhere. It changes form, it evolves, but the tradition itself continues. It may have gotten better with time. They may be experimenting a whole lot more, but it's still an unbroken tradition. How did that unbroken tradition actually come about? It came about because of these 16 to 22-year-olds. Kachch is again the only craft cluster in the country where child labor laws are for the books. Because child labor laws do not apply to craft. It's as simple as that. Much as our policymakers would like us to believe that putting a 7-year-old at the loom is child labor, nothing could be further from the truth. Handcrafted traditions survive only if you learn from a very young age. So today in Kachch, you can go to school, you can go to college, you can do what you want, but when you're done with that, you have to come to the workshop. You have to put in a few hours at the loom, at the studio, at the workshop. you also have to help in running the business. I think this is what makes Kachch very different from every other cluster in the country. A, you catch them young. 2, you teach them business. Years of trying to be resilient and surviving has made these people excellent entrepreneurs. They're very, very good at negotiation skills. They're very good at instinctively knowing what price point a particular textile will go at. They're very, very confident. It's become muscle memory and natural today, but it has been nurtured over centuries in order for it to become second nature to them. So again, another example coming in from Somaiya Vidyavihar. There was this weaver, the same kid who did the sari. He had a mulberry silk dupatta in Kora, and he priced it at 32,000. And there was also a sari priced at the same thing. And I put both, and I said, why are you pricing both at the same, and do you think you can sell a dupatta at 32,000? He didn't miss a beat, he said yes. And I said, why are you so confident? He said, because of the work. And I said, that's fair. And he said, because I know I can convince the customer. And I said, and how will you find out who's going to buy it? He said, dekh ke mujhe pata chal jayega, are they going to buy it or no? He sold the dupatta. He sold the dupatta at 32,000. Kachchhi craftsperson make for very good entrepreneurs because of these reasons. Centuries of exposure to trade, to diverse communities having to coexist and collaborate, inbuilt resilience that has come over the centuries, which brings about a lot of people skills that we don't always pay attention to. Good business people are those who know how to read the room, read the market, read the customer. I just want you all to reflect on shops that you keep going back to buy. It's because you've built a relationship with them. That shopkeeper probably knows your grandparents, your parents, you and your kids. And he keeps track. Did your kid finish college? How is he doing in XYZ place? Like I have a chap who sells steel utensils in my neighborhood. And I've known him for about 20 plus years now. And not too much bought, but it's just something that I keep going to. And when my kid moved abroad, the first thing he looked up was, okay, this is the country your kid is in. These are the kind of stoves they have, and these are the kind of utensils he will need. We didn't buy them, but the fact that he was willing to do that. And when my son walked in a couple of months ago, the first thing he said is, you know, these are new in the market, and you don't need to change your plug point and all. These will fit into those things that you have over there. It's about understanding your customer. That understanding comes when you've learned how to understand people in general. And then they become your customers. Kachchhi textile craftspersons, or any craftsperson actually, to be honest, are very, very good at this. And this comes only because they've had their back to the wall for the longest time. Really, really long, where every single day you're working with the bare minimum, and you have to do the maximum with that bare minimum. You have to wear all your wealth on you and go and hope you make it through the day and through that week. You have to hope that your children will cross that age and grow up into young adults where they can be married off. Even today, they get married very early. One of the bigger reasons why Kachch as a textile cluster works so brilliantly and are so economically well off is because when you are pastoralists, when you're nomads, and when you're constantly on the move historically, you have to take your family with you. You cannot say, I'm going ahead, the rest of you join me if you can. No. You sink or swim together. It's a trait you find in Kachch craftsperson even today. There are individual superstar entrepreneurs. There's no doubt about it. But that's a very small portion of their work. A large chunk of their work is always community-based. Which is why when the earthquake struck in 2001, a lesser community, a less prepared community would have lost the craft entirely. I'll give the example of a South Indian craft, textile craft, the Kanjivaram. Everyone is familiar with it. Every South Indian bride has a Kanjivaram in her trousseau. We may be seeing the last generation of Kanjivaram weavers as we speak. Kanjivaram as a cluster has effectively died out. We're only pretending it has not died out. Whatever is sold as Kachchhi silk today comes from surrounding villages like Arni and other places, which mimic the Kanjivaram design language, but Kachchhi itself has very few weavers. This is for two reasons. One, it's a home-based activity, not a community-based activity. There is no pride in weaving because there is no economic benefit. Let us be very honest. Heritage becomes worthy of preservation only when economic benefits are applicable. You can't ask a Swadeshi market to survive when there is no footfall. It will come down. At the end of the day, the 3 meals you put on the plate are what is going to drive you. The romanticization of heritage comes later. The economic benefit, the ecological benefit, and then come the emotional benefit of heritage. No different with any craft in the country. In Kachchhi, what has happened is that there is no economic benefit. To the extent that if you are a weaver in Kachchhi, you will not get a bride. So the current generation of weavers in Kachchhi are all in their 40s and 50s. About 90% of them are single males. Because no one wants to give a daughter in marriage. The girls, now in Tamil Nadu, free education became universal. Everyone went to school and got educated. Girls, boys, no difference. The girls in weaving communities started getting degrees. Some of them became software engineers. Some of them started working in the big 5 companies. The boys were at the loom. The boys were told, you finished high school, come to the loom. The girls don't want to marry boys who have a less education than them. And why would they, when I'm working for Infosys, why do I want to go live in a village in Kachchhi? So the last generation of Kachchhi weavers are actually struggling. I still have one of them message me once in a way, did you find a girl? I'm okay with any cause, any community, anything is okay. But I can't, the lineage cannot die with me. The craft cannot die with me. You won't see this happening in Kachch. Because the children are taught not just the craft, but the business of craft very, very early. When that happens, what you see is a line of very empowered craftspersons coming in. When I say empowered, I don't mean they take the world stage and make a name for themselves and become millionaires. No. When I use the word empowered, I'm being very careful to use it to mean they can make very informed choices. I think that is what empowerment is really about. Empowerment need not mean that every single youngster in Kachch today becomes a craftsperson. No, that's not the truth. That is absolutely not the truth. We have examples in Kachch itself. While we talk Kachch, obviously the first thing you're thinking is Ajrak, then you're thinking Bandhani, and now of course the Bhujodi weaving clusters. Then you come to the embroideries. You come to the Rabari embroidery, the Suf embroideries, then you come to Rogan. You don't think of the Ralli quilts, which are out, because there are no practitioners. Mochi Kam has no practitioners either because they've all moved out, right? Pardon? Very easily. Because it's community based, I'll come to this. This is very important. It's community based, right? Everything my students who are 16, 17, as soon as it's the legal age for the girl or the boy, they get married because they are spoken for already within the community. Pardon? It works for the community. I don't think I should be commenting from my place of privilege whether that is fair or no. What we do see is that a lot of them are spoken for verbally. The moment they turn of a legal age, they come of a legal age, I'm sure the families are, of course, doing their due diligence. And because these are very close-knit communities, they know these kids from very young age. They've sort of, everyone's growing up together and growing together as a community, as a craft community. So they are looking out for girls or for boys. They are spoken for, and when they reach the legal age, they are married off very quickly. I think 2 of my students got married last November and December. And they, you know, one craft kid is marrying another craft kid. It's business also. 2 businesses get established, right? I guess that's how business communities would think. Ambani is marrying a Piramal. We're not questioning if it's fair or unfair. But 2 Bandhani artisan entrepreneurs are getting their kids married to each other is just fair. The business stays, the craft stays, 2 young craftsmen. And what's interesting is that because of this kind of empowerment that's coming in Kachch, thanks to the fact that there's been a lot of international exposure. I don't think Kachch crafts would be where they are today if it was left to just India. Bhuj happened. An entire craft community and cluster had to relocate and rise from the ashes quite literally as Ajrakpur. World attention came there. With that came a lot of money. That money helped these craft communities get back on their feet in a very strong manner. And when communities are facing natural disasters, Anjar had an earthquake in 1956. 2001 is Bhuj. There's either a drought or an earthquake or something or the other happening in Kachch in terms of a calamity. Not on a daily basis, obviously, but there's enough natural obstacles happening for craft communities. Water shortage, Ajrak goes through that very, very regularly. It's a drought-prone area, so there is no water to do hand block printing. They have to find alternatives. But what happens as a result of this is while communities become resilient, they also become very proactively innovative. They've already got used to doing, okay, this is what happens when this happens, so let us preempt it. So when Ajrakpur was built, the architecture of Ajrakpur was different from what they originally had. Not wildly different, but different. More sustainable architecture, more earthquake-resistant architecture. But the way they did business also changed. Craft communities become resilient in that sense of the word. They also become proactively innovative, and I think that is very crucial. When you're innovative in retrospect, it brings no real benefit to the community. But when you're proactively innovative, when you're able to see ahead of the curve and say, okay, that's where it's going to land, so let me be ahead on that curve, so I will get the first mover advantage, then you reap the benefits. And when you reap the benefits, what happens is there's a lot of empowerment that happens socially as well. And a lot of girls in Kachch have always been working on the craft behind the scenes, like the bandhani, the tie and dye. They do a lot of the bobbin work also. Women play a huge role in the value chain of handicraft. They are, even in Kanchipuram, but bobbin making. Women do bobbin making. They will do the warp sizing. They will do the starching. Women are a big what do you say, they have a huge role in the handloom value chain and the handicraft value chain. So we say when you buy a meter of cloth, hand-woven cloth and handcrafted cloth, you're sustaining 16 to 17 livelihoods. That starts with the farmer or sericulturist all the way up to the person who's selling it to you. This value chain includes a lot of women who are unseen very often and unacknowledged very often, and most often underpaid or unpaid, which is not the case in Kachch. They are not probably paid as much as the weaver is paid, but they're definitely better off than the rest of the country. Weavers in Kachch get among the highest labor charges in the country today, which also causes other issues, but that's a separate topic altogether. But coming back to this, what this social empowerment does is that girls start coming from out of the shadows. When they start coming out of the shadows, they start making use of whatever tools of empowerment are there. We have a lot of people coming out of Somaiya Kala Vidya, girls exceptionally talented. Exceptionally talented. And the fact that their families support that means that these girls actually break stereotypes not just by starting their own businesses, but by doing a radical departure in terms of textile design and textile tradition. I'll give you the example of one of the girls from Ajrakpur. Not one of the girls, she is the only girl from Ajrakpur to be doing Ajrak. And I remember her father telling me that he's very proud of her because he says, what I make sells for 250 a meter. What she makes sells for 750 a meter. She's a true blue artist. Ajrak like you have not seen anywhere else in the world. Because she does not hand block print it, she hand draws and hand paints it. And then does the rest of the processes. She works very selectively. She allows her imagination to run wild, but she has a support system that enables and empowers that. And I think now is a good time to say that she has been awarded the Gaurav Kilaru Sanman for Young Artisan by the Crafts Council of Telangana for 2024, which honors craftspersons who are breaking stereotypes and making a name for themselves. So Kachch also enables this. We won't find these kind of spectacular stories coming out from other clusters, not as easily. I'll really have to struggle to come with a similar example from another cluster in the country. Kachch manages all of this only because of its unique position in India, not just geographically, but culturally, historically, and socially. The fact that there is the sea there, but you don't have access to fish. You don't have access to drinking water. It's all saline, drought prone. You can't grow fresh vegetables most of the year. There's just this limited number of things you can make, like Kurush was talking, which reflects in their textiles. The traditional textiles of Kachch would have a very limited range of colors because where do you get the water to make all the dyes? Where is the source, plant source for all the fabulous dyes? But that same harsh landscape gives rise to one of India's biggest success stories in indigenous cotton, the Kala cotton, Khamir. Again, I would not expect a similar success story from any other part of the country. It happened because it was Kachch. Growing indigenous cotton is one thing, but making it an economically successful story is a completely different ballgame, and Khamir has done that. If they had tried it in any other part of the country, it would not have worked. A community of people that is used to fighting for survival, fighting to make ends meet, and taking every opportunity that comes their way to make it economically relevant and beneficial, will generate a community of exceedingly good entrepreneurs, which is what Kachch Textiles really are about. But all are not success stories. If I take the case of Rabari embroidery, women were doing embroidery. You had the burst of craft tourism in Kachch. A lot of tourists started visiting these villages. India exotic, so you want to see these women wearing these exotic clothes with the beautiful embroidery. And they started buying these. This started giving a sense of financial freedom, but it also, according to the community elders, took the women away from their traditional roles, which meant you didn't have time to spend doing the household chores. You were chasing money. Is one problem. The second thing in the Rabari community was that the trousseau had to be done by the girl. She had to embroider her trousseau. And until that got done, you could not get married. And in the changing landscape of Kachch, it became increasingly difficult for a girl to actually complete doing a trousseau. The age of marriage started getting delayed because of inability to complete this kind of trousseau, which is becoming a financial burden on the families. So the community elders got together and put a ban on women doing embroidery. Rabari embroidery was actually banned by the community. Until you had a resurgence, one name, then second name came up, and now again you have a lot of women from the community coming back to do Rabari embroidery, but they have looked back and said, look, this is what happened when the last time we did it. Now we need to make sure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. And I think this is why documentation is important. Documentation is important not because we are always glorifying something. Like they rightly say, those who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it. If you look at Kachch, because their narratives are so closely held, a lot of oral history is in their songs. In the songs that these craft communities sing, in the stories that they share with their kids every single day. The story of their community, the success, the failure, all of it is embedded in these songs. The sacrifices that they had to make to get to where they are. This is a community's way of saying, watch out because you can't afford making the same mistake again. You can make a fresh mistake. That is allowed because you're human. Making a mistake is a sign that you're evolving, but you can't afford making the same mistake because this time you may not get a second chance. So the Rabari women who are coming today to do embroidery, they will do the embroidery, but guess who's running the business? The husbands. Because they're telling the husbands, you handle the money. We will show you the money that we can make. So you have no choice but to support what we are doing. The problem comes when the woman handles the money. That does not go down well with patriarchy. You're making it, you are keeping the money, so I don't want you doing this, which is what happened earlier. The women were keeping the money. Now they've gotten smarter. They said, we will do the embroidery, but you handle the business. You decide. So one of my students is a Rabari embroiderer, and her husband handles the business, not the most effective way. And he had gone horribly wrong in some places. And I was talking it through with her. I said, why did you let this happen? Because you know this will not go right. She said, pata tha, lekin usko sikhana tha na, कि जो वो बोल रहा है वो सही नहीं बोल रहा है. So let him learn the lesson. When he sees that I have lost out because of his mistake, he will not make it again. Very confident. After he went back from the exhibition, a week later, he picked up the phone and called me and he said, इस बार आप आएंगे तो एक दिन घर पे आएंगे क्या, मुझे वो थोड़ा समझना था. मैंने गलती कर. I made a mistake in the pricing. So because of me, her hard work went waste. I think that's a smart move by the Rabari women. You learn from the mistakes you made earlier, and now you're going to do clear division of labor. I will do the work, you take responsibility for the money. When the man sees the money coming in, he's more likely to support the wife in her endeavor. Which is very different in the case of Rogan. Rogan, I think, is a textile craft that has been subject to gatekeeping to a large extent. Just two families doing it, the same names, it will not go out of that. Very closely guarded, it did not get out of that. And for a long time, it suffered because of that gatekeeping. There was no new members coming in. Only the family, only the male members were learning. Until tourism happened, and they started realizing that the rest of Kachch crafts are making far more money than we are. Because we are not visible to the public. And how do we become visible to the public is by going out there and making things that the public will want to buy. So in the past, possibly 5, 6, 7 years, we've seen a new product come in Rogan, which is saris. Rogan otherwise was essentially wall art, what they were making that tourists could take and go. Primarily international tourists. Indian tourists do not. They've started looking at Rogan now, but earlier it was just the international tourists buying it. But the moment the Rogan artists realized that the rest of Kachch crafts are making a lot of money and getting a lot of exposure and funding, they wisened up, and you can see some Rogan saris coming out. They're still not as visible. We still do not have as many practicing craftsperson in Rogan, but again, this is a classic example of how Kachch craft communities work. Whether they want to change, they don't want to change, whether they ban a particular craft, whether they encourage a particular craft, whether they're going to allow mechanization to come into their looms or whether they keep it out, every single decision about the craft is taken by the craftsperson's community themselves. There is no outsider telling them, go put a jacquard on your loom. I'll give you another example in Kachch. 1980s, acrylic yarn was the rage, and they were making woolen shawls. So these weavers had gone to Ludhiana, seen this acrylic yarn and said, now this works. Acrylic is easier to work with than wool. It won't break, it'll cut our costs, and it comes in so many colors. So they picked up the acrylic yarn and they made shawls. What they did not bargain for was that everyone else in the country had the same idea. So everyone was picking up acrylic shawls using the same design language as the Kachch shawl weavers and made them on power looms. When these people went with their acrylic shawls, they found that their designs were already copied. The prices were a fraction of what they were selling. A lesson learnt there, and they switched out of acrylic yarns. Now here's the interesting story. This was the 1980s. Cut to 2020, 2021, acrylic yarn has come back into Kachch. Big time. Big time, it's back on the looms. The next 2 years will be interesting because we will know by then how are the craftspersons now going to handle acrylic yarn. They failed once. They waited for 40 years before bringing acrylic yarn back. Now we're going to see what lessons they've learned from the 80s and how they're going to adapt. Kachch craft communities really are a unique study and the only kind in the country. You will not get this elsewhere. Their food, everything about them is unique, but as someone working in the craft space, the need to document what they are doing is very urgent and very critical, because I think it has lessons for the rest of the country. More important than that, it has lessons for Kachchi craftspersons themselves, because if craft is a living tradition, every craft has a life cycle. What is born will die. Your resilience can become complacency. It can become arrogance, and you need to be very aware of that. Your exposure can become overexposure, and there's a very fine line. Ajrak, for instance, I think faces this dilemma today. There is the traditional hand block printed ajrak, And you have the screen printed version and the digital printed version, and the lay customer does not know the difference between these three. Part one of the problem. Part two of the problem, the demand for ajrak has gone up so much because of the exposure that supply cannot meet demand if everything is hand block printed. So a lot of craftsperson will also have screen printing units alongside the hand block printing units. While ajrak got the GI tag last year, it's going to be interesting to see how does their own community of craftsperson handle this very, very tricky path of keeping the integrity of the craft alive. Because now you're overexposed. When you see too much of something, you don't want it. I don't know if you all are aware, but Paramparik Karigar was happening at Juhu for the past 3 days. It happens twice a year. And when I was there at the World Trade Center exhibition and I was looking at the customers and listening to their responses, specifically, of course, for ajrak and bandhani, bujodi, because I teach in Kachch, every single person said, we're tired of seeing ajrak. Now, that's a very dangerous sentiment. When the customer starts getting bored, it's going to be an uphill task to get them back. There are multiple factors for this. Screen print is available at a cheaper rate. Sometimes a customer has bought something that they've thought that is hand block printed but turns out to be screen printed, and there's a trust that is broken. And they're like, oh, I don't want to get cheated again, so let me not buy. Yeah? And there is fatigue. Unless there is innovation in the market that comes at a price that the customer can afford, they will not come back to the craft. So ajrak is at a place where there is overexposure of the craft. Bujodi has started climbing up. It's still got some time before we say it's overexposed. It's still got some way to go. But there are crafts waiting in the wings. I think Kachch embroideries are fantastic and don't get due attention. But we have such few practitioners because embroidery is a skill that is passed down generation to generation through the women, not the men. And the women were primarily doing it for themselves. They were not doing it for the outsiders. The men were weaving shawls for an outsider. The Rabari woman was embroidering for herself. There's a huge difference. So it remains to be seen how embroideries like Suf and Rabari bring back all the Kachch embroideries into focus again and bring it back into, say, the limelight, not in the general public eye, but among the craft communities where the women start saying, look, we can actually do this and make money for ourselves. I'm hoping it's not a lost opportunity in the case of embroideries, but that remains to be seen. Design education, I'm standing at Somaiya, so Somaiya Kalavidya, of course, I think huge role to play. The numbers are small, mercifully. I'm not one for handling big numbers. I don't think that's right. As of now, I think they're going in the right direction in terms of offering a platform to craftsperson to hone their skills, to understand what contemporary markets are asking, but not forcing them to become entrepreneurs. I think this is very important, that we have to remember this as people watching from the outside, that just because they're from Kachch, they don't have to become entrepreneurs. Not all of them are built for it. And not all of them can become entrepreneurs either, because they're going back to the family business. Maybe out of every 20 students, I will find 2 who will actually start a business and continue it sustainably. So the focus here for design education is sustainable practices, production practices are being taken care of by the craft community, especially in Kachch. A lot of natural dyes coming in. There's a lot of emphasis on, water harvesting, effluent treatment. All of that is happening. At the customer end, we're talking to the customer about how to be sustainable as a consumer, buy more mindfully, buy better, not necessarily buy more, don't buy fast fashion. But what does not get attention is this one thing that bridges this and this. which is sustainable business models. I can have all the best practices of production, and I can have the most mindful set of customers. If I don't have an entrepreneur following sustainable business models, it all collapses. So today, that is where Kachch needs to focus on. It would be a shame if the talent in Kachch gets wasted because we are not focusing on building sustainable business models. And I'm bringing this up repeatedly because social media is a double-edged sword. It's very, very easy for youngsters to be on social media because they're digital natives. They all have Instagram accounts, they can all take photographs, they can all upload it. Can they run a business using that? Not yet. And that is where it collapses. Because they meet people, they're giving them the visiting card, they're giving them their Instagram accounts, customers are chasing them, and they are overwhelmed because they're not used to it. Because they are still part of a family business where the uncle, grandfather, father are still calling the shots. The youngsters are not calling the shots, the older people in the family are. So this kid here cannot be taking business decisions. And those people have run their business without the benefit of social media. And they work on the one single principle that don't fix what is not broken. हम Instagram के बगैर business करते थे, तुम अभी नया मत शुरू करना. I hear this all of the time. Because the older generation works on that principle. If it's not broken, don't fix it. As simple as that. So I think this is where the focus for Kachch craft person should be, especially textile crafts person. Because there's so much focus on buying handmade, supporting handmade and textiles and all of this. We bring in so much attention to it. We give so much attention to the production practices. And the in-between, the bridge that connects the two has not been readied yet. And if that is not ready, it's all going to collapse. Kachch will go the way the other crafts went in the rest of the country. They will languish. Or they will languish not due to neglect, but due to overexposure and their own overconfidence that we can do without you. We've done it so far. That could happen, and that's, I think, a very real threat that I see coming up in the next few years. Not very evident now. Now we are still on a high, but please remember what is on a high will also dip. What goes up will also fall. Happy to take questions, if there are any. Yeah. Yes. Do the traditional. No. And I think this is where it becomes really sad because, I have this little hypothesis I work with generally as a social anthropologist. Society goes through a reset every 150 years. And the direction in which it moves can be very different from what we imagine it to be. I'll give you an example, like that little kid over there, 5th photograph. She's no more there, and it's not even 50 years. 50, 60 years, not there. If I show you a photograph from Kachch about, say, 15 years ago, you won't find those people today. The rate of change in Kachch has become very rapid. What happens, and this is the flip side of exposure that I keep talking about, is when tourists started coming in, and you found that there's a demand for the craft coming from these people who are willing to pay big money, you are going to do two things. Either of these two things. And that will determine which direction your craft goes in. One response could be that I'm aware that you are going to pay for my art and you're willing to wait. So I will create the finest form of art that there is for you and extract that value from you, monetary value. Yeah? Or I will do another thing. I will compromise. I will say, oh, they're willing to spend $100 on this piece. But they don't know the difference between what it used to be and what I'm going to give them now. So I'm going to call it an innovation, and I'm going to sell it. And I will take a price for my innovation. My markup is for my innovation. So the original craft gets pushed down, and this innovation starts coming up. Like they say, a lie told 100 times becomes the truth. That becomes the truth, and that becomes the original Rogan. So today, if you show someone Rogan from 100 years ago, they'll say, "Nee, this is not Rogan. Traditional Rogan is done by this family in Nirona. You go see, I have a piece from them, which I bought 10 years ago." Right? It's going to happen in every craft. What is the craftsperson's response to this situation determines which direction it will go. So today, it may be impossible to get back to the original Rogan art because there are no practitioners. What we do have is hopefully a visual documentation of what it used to be like. And how do I get that visual documentation? Either through old photographs, through museum collections if there are any. 3, through visual depictions like in paintings. And this is where I want to again bring back the focus on visual documentation, the kind that Jyoti Bhatt is known for. And I keep saying the most authentic version of it. When you look at that picture, you know that's exactly what that girl wore at that point in time, and that's what girls like her wore. If I saw a painting, I would be able to extract details of the craft used in that painting. Mughal paintings, I look at it and say, oh, that is a muslin. Or that was an ashavali. That is a tapestry weave. That's a himru there. I can extract these details. In the past 40 years, I don't think we're able to do that. Because art is not reflecting reality today. We are creating a reality so we can reflect it in our art based on what we want to show. So today when I see teams of photographers in Kachch paying a model 1,000 rupees per hour, that's how much they get paid, I think, depending on whether you're an Indian photographer or a foreigner. The foreigners pay more, the Indians pay less. I think the Indians are paying about 200 an hour. I am setting up a reality that looks aesthetic. Jyoti Bhatt was not doing that. And that's why this documentation is so vital for us. That we look at it and we know that this is exactly what was happening in Kachch at that point in time. The houses looked like that, the food looked like that, this is how they studied, this is how their jewelry was. You go try that today, you won't get it. Yeah. Not.
And we went there to have tea, and we were told that she's newly married and she's supposed to wear that ornamentation,
Yes.
the arms and the rose ring for the whole year.
Yes.
So I feel there are pockets where I think these customs and these people are yet.
I agree to that. But do you see how far Khawra is from the tourist circuit? And thank you for not putting it as a hidden gem anywhere. If it's a hidden gem, let it stay hidden. The surest way to destroy an indigenous culture is to put it on Instagram. If you go 5 years down the line, you may not find a bride doing that. You won't. That's how, unfortunately, it evolves. And in craft communities, I think we tend to be hyper aware about it because today there is this huge trend of buying directly from the craft person. Right? So you are going into craft villages. There is an entire craft village circuit that you can do. And you go to these villages, you buy directly from the craftsperson, and they are seeing you. Their children are seeing you, aspirations are being set. Like I remember one of the weavers, master weavers telling me, he said, you know, if you come to my home and buy, this is 1,500. But if I come to Bombay and sell, it is 7,000. Because I have aspirations too of having an AC, driving a Maruti, sending my kid to college. There are aspirations, right? His kid, incidentally, his daughter is the first in his community to join NIFT. She's the first to join NIFT, and I'm very curious to see how that education is going to impact. Yes. Yes. Correct. It's prevalent across the country in indigenous cultures. And when I say indigenous cultures, I include communities in urban India as well. Textiles were not just to protect you from the elements of nature. They were your identity markers, right? You looked at the color of the clothes. Like, for instance, the Bishnoi tribe in Rajasthan. If you looked at a woman's feet, you knew that she was married, how many sons she had, how early was she widowed, how long has she been widowed for, because her jewelry, her tattoos, and the border of her skirt would give you that information. I'll give you a very simple example, even simpler example than that. There is the community of East Indian Christians in Bombay. Khotachi Wadi, Vasai is the Kolis, you have Gorai, Manor, Dharavi, etc. The bride would wear a red sari, the lugra. Yeah? A new widow would wear a blue. If you've been widowed for very long, you would wear a purple. There's an interesting textile that they have, which they wear on the third day of marriage. So she gets married, goes back to her mother's house, and her in-laws come to pick her up. And she gets married in a red lugra, and she comes out of her maternal home into her marital home wearing a lugra that is called Sonkari lugra. Sonkari lugra was green and red. Red is a symbol of fertility. In all agrarian communities, red is a symbol of fertility. She adds green to her lugra to show that I'm bringing not just fertility, but I will bring progress and prosperity into my marital home. Because I turned adolescent in my mother's house, now I'm going to bear your children, but I will also bring progress and prosperity, hence the green. She wears green bangles and a green and red sari when she goes to her marital home. So there are 4 saris. Same with the Kunbis of Goa. Red to get married in, blue as a new widow, purple as a senior citizen widow. So every indigenous community in the country is defined by its textiles. Yeah, it is. Kachch also. Kachch is no different. Kachch is no different. I'm sure people who are very, very well versed with Kachch culture will be able to look at those pictures and give you a very detailed breakup of exactly, everything that was going on in that bhunga at that point in time. Unfortunately, we don't see that as much now because we've become more secular in our dressing. Aspirations do that. And change. This is part of the change. You can't always fight that. So the best thing you can do is try and understand the process of change. So you're just better prepared. And in my case, and in the case of people like me, we are just looking at the lens of how do we actually preserve this information. That this used to be this way once upon a time. We may not be able to get it back because it is no longer relevant, but we need to understand the journey of a community. And that's very important. Whether the change was forced on them, whether the change was something that they chose to, I think those are very critical markers in the journey of things. That will also determine the direction in which craft communities go in Kachch. Is it going to be a change that we have brought upon, or is it change that they have chosen by themselves? Thank you so much. When you do go to Kachch, please visit the craft villages. I will not say don't go, but please do read up, because don't look at buying handmade textiles as a purchase, look at it as an investment. Just as you would invest in a piece of art or in a real estate, that's exactly how you should invest in handmade textiles. So do your reading up, learn thoroughly that textile is going to be there. Read up, put your money in it. Thank you.
मूंखे बहु आनंद थियो कि मणे पंहिंजो खाधे जो पंहिंजो ज्वेलरी पंहिंजो हस्तकला अने अल्टिमेटली पंहिंजो इतिहास अने संस्कृति जो साथे मजा करो. So thank you everyone for being here. Yamini had to leave early, so I'm going to give a quick vote of thanks. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you Shalini for this amazing show. And thank you everyone at Somaiya Vidyavihar and Mama for making this happen. I wanted to say a couple of things. When we were thinking about the programming of this show, rather than starting to talk about an art practice, we thought, why don't we start talking about the subject? The subject is Kachch, which is why now we should call it the Kachch. I thought, why don't we? What better day to celebrate than to have a Kachchhi day as the inaugural opening for such a beautiful archive of our history. So in context, this is an educative show. At Vidyavihar, we're using art as an excuse to educate. It's a beautiful opportunity for us to learn about ourselves and about our past. So this is why we did Kachchhi Day. Today we learned about the ghee pot, the coin jewelry, the threads of resilience. I think just for more context, art cannot sit on walls. It has to speak to us and not at us. Now that we've gotten this context, I'd love, for everyone to hear the whispers of the show. Yesterday, when I was sitting here with Sanskriti, around 3:30, this 12th standard girl came. Her name was Sai Sharika. And she said, this was an inbound request. We didn't ask her what you thought. She just came to us and she's like, what a wonderful show. I've been to shows all over galleries in Bombay, but this was the most special show. And we were like, wow, tell us more. And she said, that guy over there playing the flute, she said, I could hear him. And I was thinking, wow, it reminded, 80 years later, she's hearing his flute. It reminded me of this quote by Albert Einstein, which said, we physicists know that the distinction between past, present, and future is a mere illusion, mere persistent illusion. And I thought that, wow, this is such an important moment because the past is not a relic which is static. The past is within us. It's for us to use education as that shot of coffee which makes the past, which was once dormant, alive again. And I think this is a superb opportunity like that we're all taking together, building together, and just to make, our past enriched our today and eventually our future. And this is what Mama keeps talking about. I'm constantly inspired by him. So I just wanted to say thank you for everyone being here. Thank you. And now we can hear the whispers together of the show.